Whoa, hello there. We're good. Everything's good. Now, there are a lot of coffee gizmos and gadgets on the market nowadays, and this is all very exciting. It kind of feels like every week there's either a new technique or a new tool being shown off. And as much as I love this, it does lead to a lot of questions. Namely, do you like said tool? Do you use said tool? What do you actually use? What do you think of any of this? And so, I thought I would try to answer all of those questions very ambitiously today by showing you how I brew coffee on an everyday basis. Social media, video content aside, how do I actually make coffee and what do I use? We're going to be looking at both filter/pour over and also espresso. So let's just get started. I'm doing a lot of hand motions today. I think this is going to be how it is. Let me go grab my kettle. Now, in showing you everything that I use in my everyday setups, I'm not here to provide you with any empirical data over why these things are the absolute best or most wonderful or most scientifically perfect things to do when brewing coffee. However, I will say that I have used a lot of brewers and tools and gadgets and gizmos over the years, and these are the things I have settled on. Coffee setups tend to be very tailored to everyone's individual needs and also the coffees they're brewing. So this is all tailored to my needs, and hopefully by talking through why I do everything that I do, it will provide you with a little bit more information when building out your setup. But filter coffee. I have 6 things in front of me. Let's talk through them and then let's talk about my filter coffee recipe. Now, when brewing pour over coffee, the first thing you need is a pour over kettle, namely a gooseneck kettle. This is the one that I have and I have preferred for quite a few years. This is the Stag EKG by Fellow Products, and this is a pretty popular kettle. You'll probably recognize this if you've been anywhere in coffee spaces online. I find this to be a pretty aesthetically pleasing kettle, which is something I do look for. Functionally, this is really nice. It allows you a lot of control over your water temperature, which is nice if you're brewing teas or different coffees or different roast levels. And also, I find it to be pretty ergonomical. The next thing one needs is a scale, a gram scale specifically, preferably something that weighs out to the 10th of a gram, potentially even 100th if you can get that far. This is the one that I use, and this is a multi-purpose scale. I use this both for pour over, and we'll also talk about it when we get back to espresso. This is the Pearl. It's from a company called Akaya, and it has 2 primary functions that I really like. It of course has a really nice measurement system, and also it has a built-in timer, which I find to be pretty valuable when shopping for scales. This is a scale you will see very frequently in cafes. It's kind of industry standard nowadays. It's definitely more on the premium side, but I find it to be very worth it. Now, the brewer I use. Like most coffee professionals and content creators, I have accumulated quite a few brewers. Probably and almost most definitely too many brewers. However, I think you'll find if you ask any coffee brewer about their collection, they'll tell you that they tend to gravitate back towards one. That one, I'm sure, is different for everyone, but for me, it's the Hario V60. This is a conical brewer that does a really nice job of brewing cups of coffee that tend to have a lot of clarity and a really nice clean body to them. Most of the coffees that I find myself brewing at home tend to be pretty light in their roast level, and they also tend to be pretty experimental in their processing method. And so this is a brewer that really allows me to highlight those different qualities in coffee in a way that I find really easy and enjoyable. There's a reason that this brewer and also the Kalita Wave are kind of like the 2 mainstays in the specialty space. It's like if you want a conical brewer, you probably have a V60. If you want a flat-bottomed brewer, you probably have a Kalita Wave. And of course, a filter to go with it. Now, I'm the type of person that tends to be pretty picky about the cup that I use and also the liquid that goes into the cup. And so when I'm brewing pour over, I tend to use a double-walled glass like this. This is nice for a couple of reasons. First of all, I like seeing my coffee while it's been brewed. Very personal thing, but I do find that quite pleasing. And then secondly, I really like having it double walled so that I'm not in any concern about burning my hands when I pick up hot liquid in it. This is another product from Fellow. It's got like a nice kind of like tasting lip to it, so it's very pleasant to drink from if you are someone who takes that into consideration. This is my black coffee cup. This is what I always use. And lastly, is a little bit less of a product and more of just a general note about my coffee brewing. I do pay pretty close attention to the water that I'm using when brewing coffee. I will have to fact check this after I finish filming, but I want to say that filter coffee is something like 98% water. Again, I'll check that afterwards. However, that water that you're using does have an impact on the final taste of your coffee. This right here is a little vial of minerals that have been specifically tailored for coffee. You use them in combination with distilled water to remineralize that water and then brew with it. There are tons of different brands out there that I've messed around with. This is Apex Labs. Third Wave Water is another very popular brand. Lotus Water. There are a whole different variations, but this is just to say that I do pay attention to my water chemistry, and I do recommend it to be something you do if you're in an area where you have particularly hard water or particularly soft water. Regardless though, let me go get my water back up to temp. Let me go grind some coffee, and then we'll talk about my recipe. I'll see you soon. I want to give a huge thank you to Skims for sponsoring today's video. I'm going to be fully honest and a bit vulnerable here. I've always found shopping for both clothes and intimates stressful. Maybe that's apparent from the fact that I own 18 versions of the same outfit, but genuinely, finding items that both feel good and make me feel good has always been difficult. However, I've been wearing Skims since before they even reached out about their Fits Everybody collection. My priorities have always been comfort, compression, and smoothness under t-shirts, and the Fits Everybody collection fits each of those markers. With a wide array of colors and styles, there really is something for everyone, even someone as picky as me. My personal favorite pieces are the Racerback Bralette and Cheeky Brief, both in onyx. The bralette especially is subtle, supportive as someone with a larger chest, and lies smooth under all my shirts. Now to check out the Fits Everybody collection yourself, available in sizes extra small to 4X, you can click the link in the description, and after you place your order, be sure to let them know that I sent you. Select YouTube in the survey, and be sure to select my channel in the drop-down menu that follows. Welcome back. Now, previously, a couple years ago, I went down kind of the rabbit hole of brewing, where I tailored different brewing recipes to like every single coffee that I got. And moving forward in my life, I have found that I don't necessarily have time for that anymore. I will be the first to admit that I tend to get a lot more nerdy on the espresso side than I do on the pour-over side, and so finding a recipe that worked well across a multitude of coffees became really important. So, what I'm about to do here for you today, which feels very vulnerable, sharing my everyday brew recipe, but this is what I use across most coffees. I will adjust the grind size depending on the age of the coffee, the origin, the density, all those things, but besides grind size, there aren't a ton of variables I really play with anymore. Now, we're using a ceramic brewer right now, so before we get into brewing, I'm gonna pre-wet my filter and also preheat the brewer. I'm using about 100 grams / 100 mils of water here. For a single serving of coffee for myself, I like to do 15 grams of coffee in, and then the total weight of our coffee is going to be 250 grams. Also, a note, the milliliter to gram conversion with water is 1:1. So when I say 250 grams of water, I also mean 250 mils of water. Give the bed just a tiny shake, make sure it's nice and level, and let's start pouring. I'm gonna start my timer, and I'm gonna bloom with 50 grams of water. Nice, even spiral motion. Smells good. We'll let it bloom for about 30 seconds, and then we'll go in and we'll pour up to 150 grams. Each time I'm doing a spiral pour and then coming back to the center and finishing in the middle. Pretty standard, nothing fancy with agitation or really anything here. This is 3 pours. The first one is the bloom to 50 grams, then we go up to 150, and our last pour is going to be up to 250. We're at about 1 minute and 15 seconds. Let's go in with our last pour. And that is about as complex as I get in my everyday brewing. Now, of course, there are always still scenarios where I'm gonna be a little bit more complex and really tailor the recipe to the coffee. I also really enjoy when roasters provide recipes for their coffee. I will tend to follow those. However, if I am going in blind to a coffee, this is what I do. I found this to be replicable, consistent, and pretty easy for me on an everyday basis. And it's pretty tasty, but that's filter. Things get a little bit more complex when we get back there, so let's move to the espresso machine. Okay everyone, welcome behind the counter to the espresso machine station. Now, before we get started with all the doodads and knickknacks that I have back here, you may notice that my espresso machine changed kind of recently. We're not gonna talk about that today. That will be a future video, but for now we'll focus on everything that is around both the grinder and the machine. So, first things first. It turns out it is pretty hard to ignore water when brewing coffee, both on the filter side and also on the espresso side. I am someone who remineralizes my espresso machine water, and I do suggest most people do this as well, both from a flavor standpoint, but additionally from a more functional standpoint. Mineral buildup within machines is a very common thing. It pretty much always happens to some extent. However, using water that is mineralized to be in an espresso machine will help negate that. This will save you some trouble down the road, and it's pretty easy to do. Okay, water aside, let's look at some things. On my espresso station, I have 2 scales. Now, we saw the Pearl earlier. This gets used for weighing espresso as we're dosing in and out of the grinder. And secondly, I have a smaller scale that lives on the other side of my machine and gets used exclusively on the machine. This is by that same company, Akaya. However, this one is called a Lunar. It does functionally the same things as the Pearls. It has a nice gram measurement system. It also has a timer. However, it's nice and small, so it can fit right there. And I can nicely weigh out my shots. Again, as far as scales go, the Lunar additionally is a pretty premium scale. It's kind of like industry standard within cafes, but I really like it. I think it works well. And if you're gonna invest in a scale, I think the Lunar is a pretty good option. Let's look at these things. First things first, we have my distribution tool. Now, I, like most people in the espresso world nowadays, have come to really love WDT. That is an acronym that stands for Weiss Distribution Technique, and it refers to all the things that you see people doing when they have needles rummaging around in their bed of coffee. Something of note is that when I say WDT, I'm of course referring to a technique, not a specific tool. So within WDT, you will see all sorts of tools in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some getting as rudimentary as a cork that has acupuncture needles put in it, or some that look a little bit more like this. This is the auto comb from a brand called Barista Hustle, and it's what I have settled on over the years as being my on-bar favorite WDT tool. Of course, you'll note we have these 12 needles here, and instead of spinning them manually around your bed of coffee to distribute everything and knock out any clumps, instead it has a little bit more interesting system. For example here, we have a portafilter. You would put your coffee inside. The auto comb slots on. Needles go down into the basket. And it's with this simple motion with your palm that the needles spin. If you want to see it from the top down. I've tried all sorts of WDT tools. I think the auto comb really fits my needs best. One of the things I like about it is that it kind of takes the human element out of WDT. You really need 3 rotations on here and you're kind of good to go. Whereas with manual WDT, it's kind of up to you. Sometimes it can go really well and sometimes it can go really wrong. Additionally, I like this because it's a pretty robust and durable tool. The whole phrase Morgan spills coffee definitely doesn't only exist with liquid drinks. I have a tendency to kind of chuck things around, knock things over, and so having something that can withstand that is really nice. This is definitely a tool that was built for cafes, and so with that it is meant to kind of handle some roughhousing, if you will. Now this right here is the tamp that I use, and if I look over there, I can see there's 8 tamps within my line of vision, so it's safe to say that I have plenty, but this is the one that I keep on my bar. This right here is called the Force Tamp. It is a pretty premium tamp that is spring-loaded so as to, again, create more consistency and take some of the guesswork out of the human element of making coffee. You will see these a ton on the barista competition stage. I have used these for years, and a lot of that is due to the level of consistency in relation to scoring points. But the same kind of applies when you're brewing coffee at home. You don't necessarily get marked down on a technical side, but having consistency can be really nice if you're making a ton of coffee. Perhaps to demonstrate this, allow me to grind some coffee and I'll show you. From start to finish, grind our coffee in, weigh it out, a few light taps just to settle everything. I'm gonna kind of freehand this. I would recommend if you are a barista at home, do give yourself a nice surface to work on. However, for demonstration, I'm gonna do this mid-air. It's like circus brewing here. Our auto comb goes on. Comes off. As you can see, Nice even distributed bed of coffee. Now you'll notice that on this tamp there are kind of like two levels to it, one of them coming out slightly further. So you'll note that the tamp sits solidly on top, and then all you have to do is press down. It is a bit loud, but remove that. Nice, easy, consistent tamping with a preloaded amount of pressure. One of the reasons I additionally like seeing these in cafes is that they help reduce any sort of wrist strain that you might get if you have bad tamping position. When working in a cafe, you are pulling so many shots. I dare say hundreds in high volume cafes, and poor tamping position can over time lead to strain in the wrist or even carpal tunnel. That saves you from some of it. Now we'll pull that shot of espresso shortly. However, one of the most asked about things I get on my bar is actually this little thing around the steam wand right here. This is a steam wand guard slash rag from a company called Artpresso. You'll notice it has this hard exterior shell, and then inside you have a pretty standard rag. But this is really nice because you can use it as a cover for your steam wand, or additionally, you open it up and it protects you from all that hot steam coming out. This is, I want to say, like $30 in total. It comes with multiple interchangeable little rags inside that you can easily peel off and clean, and I think it's just like a nice little addition. It makes everything nice and clean and reduces the amount of bar towels I have to keep around. Of course, I do always have a machine bar towel. Now, one thing I do have on top of my machine of note, I always use these little OXO measuring cups for pulling my shots into. I'm not a huge fan of pulling your espresso directly into your service cup. I think it's very annoying if you end up with a shot that channels and perhaps you had a syrup in the cup, perhaps it's a cup that's harder to clean, yada, yada, yada. I don't like to kind of risk that, and so I will almost always pull into a smaller measuring cup like this and then transfer into whatever I'm gonna drink or serve the coffee in. Additionally, on my bar, I always keep 2 milk pitchers. These are both from WPM, which is distributed by Slow Pour Supply here in the US. I will always keep a nice larger pitcher for drinks that are 8 ounces or above, and I'll always keep a smaller pitcher for anything from a cappuccino to even a macchiato. On top of my machine, I have yet another cup of tiny spoons. You will remember that I also have tiny spoons over there under the island. This is for if I'm drinking or dialing an espresso and need to stir it. And that is my espresso setup. Let's pull that shot that we just tamped. Cheers. It's a little bit late in the day to finish all of this, but it's pretty tasty, so I just might. But yeah, that is both my filter coffee and my espresso coffee setup. Like, this is very normal brewing behavior that I do every day, fully off camera. And hopefully this was kind of interesting to you. Frankly, I would love to hear from you all as to what your everyday equipment setup looks like. I think one of the funnest parts about how many different offerings are out there nowadays is that everyone can really tailor into their needs and their prioritizations, which frankly, yours are probably different than mine. But regardless, this was fun, and I hope you all learned something. As usual, my name is Morgan. You can find me here on YouTube once a week, plus shorts, or on Instagram and TikTok almost every single day. I hope you all have a great day. I'm gonna go take the rest of my espresso, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.